Hey everyone, I want to welcome you to this special episode of the HX podcast. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. First off, many of you know me from my previous podcast, which was the Hard Money $1 Million podcast with my good friends Matt Sancombe and Gabe Marshank. And in that podcast, we had a strategy. We were looking to take $10,000 and turn it into $1 million, no matter what we would do, as long as it was legal, mind you. So we looked at any asset class. We looked at, any opportunity, etc. For the HX podcast, we've been a lot more focused on bonds and crypto. But I know that a lot of our audience is looking at a lot of different asset classes. And if you're like me, you have an interest in many other things. And there's a lot of ways to make money and that are very valid and that can add uncorrelated returns to your portfolio. So today, I'm thrilled to welcome back a guest that had joined us on the Hard Money podcast, a gentleman named Nick Andrews, Boston Card Hunter on Instagram, and of the podcast Sports Card Madness. First off, Nick, how you doing, man? How you been?
I am good, Enrique. It's funny. I remember being on your other pod, and I have a story I can share with the audience where I actually turned 10,000 into 300,000 just from sports cards. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I've been great. I'm happy to be on.
Nice. Absolutely. Well, good. We appreciate it. And so what I want to do here, we're going to launch into this in a second. But again, I want to give some context here. I'm 51 years old. I got involved in the stock market when I was 16. But my first introduction to investing, assets, portfolios was baseball cards and comic books. I literally went out, and this was before Excel. I would take on, it was on an Amiga, whatever a word processor they had. And I would chronicle my baseball cards and comic books and write them down. And I was a little bit more of a comic book guy, although then I became more of a card guy. I would wait until the Overstreet Price Guide monthly would come out. And I would go in and mark up the prices and my portfolio and calculate monthly returns. I was doing this shit when I was like 11, 12 years old, which means that I had a lot of other bad shit going on in my life, trauma that wanted me to take control. But I think that I'm probably a lot like a lot of our audience in that, a lot of our first experience with assets, portfolios, et cetera, was with cards, comic books, other collectibles. We're both card geeks, although you're like a level 11 card geek and I'm like a level 3 card geek. There's going to be a lot of terminology in here that a lot of people don't understand. One of them is, and let me just explain this. In collectibles, there's been the creation of grading services. These go out and they take a collectible, a comic book, a baseball card, a coin, and they have an objective observer. They have standards where you submit that to them, and then they tell you this is and the big one in cards is PSA. What does PSA stand for again, Nick?
That's Professional Sports Authority. I don't even know anymore. It's owned by Collectors Universe, and just think of it as a grading authority. And don't worry about the acronym. They're just like the referee or the boss of the grading world. And
I think it's important to talk about this because it was a huge change in the market. It used to be if I had a card and you had a card, I'd say mint, you'd say near mint, and the difference in price between the two was 50%. Sure. And then, there'd be all these arguments, right? And it's like, I'd send you a card, you'd be like, that wasn't mint, that was near mint, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. PSA kind of took that away and said, we decide what's mint and near mint. And as long as they maintain authority and credibility. And what happened was the prices went up. They started by going up 5-fold. Eventually, they went up 1,000-fold. But the fungibility, the ability to trade went up tremendously. And I'll give a stock market example. What happens, the stock market has rules. Every share has to be certified and does that. But what happens if I said, okay, I own a share of IBM, but it's written on the back of this piece of paper with a guy from IBM, and you said, oh, I've got a share written by another guy, and we went to go trade those shares of IBM. IBM. Who the fuck knows whether they're really shares of IBM? What happened in the collectibles world is these companies stepped in and created an authority, a system, etc., so that you could have, agreement on grading, agreement on, what was what, and that created liquidity and value, etc. So,
Exactly.
and just one second, let's do one thing here. I'm going over to my computer. I do want to know. I want the answer here. What does
PSA stand for?
PSA stand for? PSA stands for, well, apparently it stands for prostate specific antigen.
I think it's professional sports authentication, but
in collectibles, it is professional sports authenticator, PSA. So now we know.
you
Okay, so let's jump into the rest of the conversation here. So, the first thing I'd love to start with, Nick, walk us through a little bit of your journey. How did you get involved in cards? What your sort of history is. And then let's go up through 2020, and then I want to pick up the story there, and I want to chime in a little bit. So,
Yeah, of course.
Give us the story.
Yeah, so like you and probably like a lot of your listeners, so I'm 43, a little bit younger, but I collected cards in the 80s and it was super fun, something to do with my dad. I'd write to players on the teams, get autographs, and I didn't think much of it through college and, life just got busy, right? And then, I was just having one of those like annual meetings with my financial advisor and, he manages my money and we just talk through where the money is. It's, stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity. And we're just trying to think of other asset classes to diversify a little bit. And we were talking about collectibles. And I told him, I'm like, I hate art. I don't really want art on my walls and I don't really care about it. I like vinyl, but that's not really going to do it. But I love sports cards, right? And so he's like, that kind of fits the collectibles class. And I started getting into it, going down the rabbit hole of figuring out what's valuable, what's not, what's high end, what's low end.
Can I ask one real quick question? What year was this that you had this conversation with the financial advisor?
It's crazy, man. It's like 2019. My spidey sense was going off or something.
Okay, got it.
It was very timely. And, I just started dabbling in I watch the Celtics. I collect Celtics stuff. We're talking $200-$300 cards, just having fun with your kid, right?
Yep.
And then it started to get serious and I really started to think through, okay, should I get a Michael Jordan rookie for 5 figures, that type of thing, and start to think about how to place my bets. And the whole thing got kicked off by a scam, really. I was getting, I was going to do a trade with somebody off of eBay. They were going to trade me a PSA 7 Michael Jordan card, which is, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000. I was going to trade them a Kareem rookie, which is about the same price. The Jordan card that I got ended up being fake. And the guy made good on it, and he gave me, as a replacement, again, this is 2019, 2020, he gave me a full 1986 Fleer set just to mess with. So just the raw cards, not in a slab.
Yeah.
And then I had a light bulb in my head. And I talked to my financial advisor and said, you know what? I'm going to get every single one of these autographed for the entire set.
Okay.
And I bet that's going to be worth a bonkers amount of money. And so that's where we left it. And he's like, all right, I blessed this idea.
Can I ask you a couple quick questions? Because I had once an instance where I bought a 68 mantle, which was a PSA 8 or 9. And that was the last mantle card. And 3 or 4, or actually it might have been 7, 8 years later, because I started buying my PSA cards in 2002, 2003, which I'll tell you actually ended up being in some ways a mistake because I was working on PSA 9, PSA 10 Yankee sets. But at the time, there were a bunch of cards where there was 1 or 2 or 3 of some 1977 random Yankee PSA 10. So I was paying $200, $300. Now there's 100 of them and they're worth $10. But I had this 68 mantle card that I had for years. And one day I get an email from PSA and it says, there's been a challenge to the legitimacy of your card. And I'm like, what? I forget the verbiage. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, someone else claims they have the card and you have it in your set registry. So we went back and forth and they're like, we need you. We're going to revoke your registration unless you send us the card. And I'm like, really? You got to be fucking kidding me. But I went ahead and I sent them the card. And it turns out someone had bought some other PSA card, cracked the slab, took a 68, shaved it so that it looked perfect, went into a Kinko's, printed their own like label, the whole thing, put it in the slab, and then sold it to me for like $2,000 or whatever it was, what it was going for at the time. So I still have the card, by the way.
Wow.
I mean, the card's worth a couple $100. I think it's whatever. It's an altered, card now. But what was wrong with the Jordan rookie that you had?
Oh, it was a fake card, a fake slab, a fake label. The label was a Garbage Pail Kids label, I think, on the inside.
Got it.
And it was just they used an old label, so the whole thing was finagled. I was a noob, It was a painful lesson, but a lesson that kind of sparked things. So it was okay.
Well, but the guy who sold it to you, apparently he didn't know either if he made good on it.
No, right? He got it from a friend who he said, "quote I'm not surprised." And then, he gave me kind of his best asset to replace it, and, we were all good.
Okay, cool. And was the 86 set, and I'm sorry, there's some people listening to this who probably don't know anything about cars, but there's some who really do. Did the 86 set, those used to come in a box, right?
Yeah, I've got a signed one. You might not be able to see it, but I've got a signed one on my desk over there by Kareem and Bird and Magic. But yeah, it's this box. You could get them for about $10. They're about 125,000 now. A sealed box.
Got it.
The packs alone are 3,000.
Did he send you an 86 box, or he just sent you the individual cards?
Just a set. So there's 133 cards. He sent me those cards. And it wasn't. It's probably $2,000 or $3,000. It was. We kind of split the difference. We both got screwed.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So let's go back through this. So 2019, your spidey sense is going off. You like cards. You start dabbling, things like that. Walk us through, and I'm going to say the last time we spoke was probably in late 21, 22. Mm-hmm. I want you to walk us through the end of 21, the beginning of 22, kind of what your journey is, what you were doing, what was going on, and then I want to pick it up there, and I want to. I want to give you what I think has happened, and then I want to hear what really happened.
Yeah, I was just watching the madness of the modern card market and just thinking it was all just insane. Like the 73 different versions of rookies and colors and stripes and all of that. And then I looked at this, I immediately decided I only wanted to mess with vintage. I only wanted to mess with signed vintage because it's scarce. I did a calculation in my head and said, if I pull off this autograph set, there's probably only about 25 in the world that can exist. And how many Picassos are there? How many Rembrandts are there? If 25 of an asset like this, I mean, it's the most iconic card year there is.
How many of those guys were dead when you went to go do the set? Just out of curiosity.
18. So you got to buy those.
Okay.
Right? Unless you got a gypsy and an Ouija board, you're buying those cards.
Right.
But surprisingly, I got about half for free. So I was bored with my son, and there's a lot of places you can go to look up addresses of players and so on and so on. And we'd write to them, man, and they send them the cards, send it right back. Sometimes you stick $10 in there, and we really started to compile it fast.
That's people forget, and I wonder how many newer card collectors that was done for decades and decades. It was the norm. I've seen videos of, and I don't want to say it was Joe DiMaggio because he was kind of a D, so I'm not sure he would have done it. But I've seen videos of like these guys. They would just get cards, and it was like, okay, here's the 100 cards. Like I'm just gonna sign these cards and kids loved it and all that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's wild. So we got like half that way. Another 30% are your Larry Birds, your Magics, your Kareems. You pay them a couple $100. They sign the card through signings or whatever. The deceased players just had to network and get them harder than you think. There's a couple weird cards where like there's somebody who it's not his picture, so he hates it and he just refuses to sign the damn card. I sent him $500 check and he signed the card. Like just stuff like that. And then I finished it off with MJ at auction, summer of it's like 21, something like that. Finished the set.
Okay.
And then I was proud of what I was doing because the market was going nuts for just like just classic bubble behavior. And I just wasn't having any part of it. So I wanted this set that's actually, it's like a museum piece almost. And at the end of the day, I talked to Christie's and they said the set's probably worth 300 to 500 grand. It's all PSA slabbed. I'm not going to sell it. It's going to my son. It's kind of something fun we did together.
Yeah.
He can sell it for his first house or something, but
couple other questions. How much did you probably have invested in the set?
This is wild, dude. So I'm going to say I probably spent 40 or 50 grand all in with grading.
Okay.
However,
Yeah.
I'm probably net zero in terms of selling duplicates. So I hit that error card guy back up, get a few more cards signed, sell them for $3,000 a piece, just flip and flip. And then I found an MJ raw, you know, and so basically I'd say 0 to 10 grand into this thing that's worth, you know, 300 to 500. It's great.
Wow, that's fantastic. And then when you got them slabbed, what's the average grade on the set?
I'm going to say it's a 7 for the card. You know, the autos are probably about the same. It's pretty good. It's almost inconsequential because there's only 3 of these that I know of in the world right now that are slabbed.
Okay.
So I feel pretty good about it, but I'm always upgrading, especially the living players. They do signings. I'm like, upgrade the card. Just keep going. And then, then I even got the referees from that season. I got them all to sign checklists. So then I got bored. I started another set.
Let's go back to that. When you say you're always upgrading, is that you go and find a PSA 9 of something you had in a 7 and then have them autograph the 9?
I'll actually, like, let's say the card's like a 5 or something like that. And Bill Lambier, he's about to do his first signing in 10 years in a couple weeks. I've got his card, it's like a 5. So I cracked out an 8 and I'll send that to the signing and hope for a nice little upgrade, you know?
Got it. And then you actually, and again, this is part I don't know because I don't know the other card. You have them sign the physical card?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So then fascinating.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So what was the next set that you focused on?
The 1969 Topps, the Tall Boys. It's these white tall boys from the late 60s.
Yeah. I know what they're. Yeah.
That's tough. I'm 5 away on that one. That's probably $500,000 when I pull that off. It's taken me a lot longer. I did 86 in like 4 months. This is going to take me it's been a year.
How many cards are in the set?
99. And it's, you know, it's the big, it's like Kareem and Wilt and Jerry West. It's like that whole era.
No, I have so I'm a Suns collector. And so I have I think I've got the full Suns set in PSA 8 or 9, not autographed. But yeah, I mean, imagine with that one, you're going to run into the issue with a couple guys that are deceased.
Yeah, half of them are gone. You know.
Yeah. Got it. So let's
go ahead.
Let's take a step back. So you kind of stepped into it in 2019. You I don't want to say lucked into, but you happened into this 86 kind of set situation. But what were you doing in the card market? So this is a hobby for you, or that part is a hobby, okay? And obviously a very lucrative one. But I want to come back to that in a second because I think it's fucking fascinating. Then what did you do during 2021, 22? Because I thought I recalled us talking and you were actively trading cards.
Yeah.
Like you were going out, buying in the open market, flipping them. Walk us through sort of what your methodology was, what you were doing, you know, to the extent you're comfortable. Give us some numbers so we can understand it.
Yeah, so there was part of me that was just acquiring assets, right? So like a Pistol Pete Maravich rookie card, there's only 9 signed in the world. Got one of those, right? And there's several cards like that I just acquired rare vintage signed cards. And then, yes, there was so much arbitrage out there. One really great arbitrage situation was I just made friends with Kareem's team through email. And I said, hey, will he sign his first name on the card for me too? And I was like the first person they did that to. I had him sign like 8 of his rookie cards with his full name. And I 5X'd every single one of those cards.
You're saying because he only signed his first name usually?
Up until a couple of years ago, he only signed Abdul-Jabbar. And then I kind of opened the floodgates. Now he's doing it for everybody. But I had a little moment there, a little window, like all arbitrage situations are. You've got this little window until it shuts. It's great.
Yeah. Got it.
So it's doing stuff like that. And it was fun.
Okay. So were you then, so it sounds like you were focused on vintage. You were focused on autographed in particular, and then basically acquiring cards, vintage cards that you felt you then could, they were either autographed already or that you then could get autographed, and then, you know, basically reposting those into the market.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
That the core of the strategy?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's other great things too. There's a triple rookie. It's 1980. It's got Dr. J, Magic, and Larry Bird on it. They're all living.
I had one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
They all sign. and the cost to put it together is only about half of what you can sell it for if you maintain the grade of the card. So I mean, I did that for my personal collection, but there's also, people don't think of this stuff. They just think of like all the modern weird card stuff out there that's selling for, you know, all this crazy money. But if you just quietly do something that's scarce, that it'll pay off in the long run, you know.
No, I love the scarcity idea. I mean, I think it's a big one. So for the whole card trading period, well, let's call it the COVID period. I'm gonna say COVID period starts March of 2020, and I'm gonna say this is fucking arbitrary. I don't know where I'm coming with it. It ends the end of 21, okay, which I'm kind of putting it along with the stock market too, right? You know, as the stock market shit itself for the first time at the beginning January of 22. So we're gonna say the COVID period is March of 20 to 21. Couple questions. How much of your time, I'll just throw them all out there and you can answer that. How much of your time were you focused on cards? You know, what do you think your total invested was, your P&L? And then how much of it was focused on this autograph strategy versus other strategies? And what were some of those other strategies? There's 4 questions
So
there.
it's interesting. I mean, I'm a semi-retired entrepreneur. I still invest in companies and an angel investor and stuff. So I had some time on my hands. Most of what I do is virtual anyway. I'm with my son and my family, like, you know, during COVID. So we're cooped up. And I don't know, man, I probably spent 20% of my time on cards, you know, besides Netflix and like all the other crap we were doing, working out. So, you know, I was having fun. It was a real hobby, right? And then putting together that set was a big chunk of that 20%. And then, you know, I think if we take a big zoom out on the P&L, you know, I probably spent, you know, we'll say, like I said, on this set, I spent 50 to 70 to put this set together. I probably spent another 30 grand on we'll call it 100 grand, flipping, moving, creating value. That was probably worth, you know, I guess 400, you know, if you count the set plus the other stuff. We're talking 4x, 4.5x. This is before the 69 set. Obviously, that came a little later. I felt pretty good about that, but it's unrealized, right? It's not like I haven't cashed it out. The set's sitting there for, you know, for the lower tax rate of my son in the future. But
I don't mind that though, because that's like, you know, it's one thing when you're realizing, you know, you're sitting on an unrealized gain on like a bunch of Juan Soto cards or something like that. It's another when you're sitting on an unrealized gain on an 86 set. And you say, okay, so you spent 20% of your time across 18 months, deployed 100K, and maybe turned it into $500,000 or something like that. Is that fair?
Yeah. And remember, I had a lot of fun doing it. Like, I would have done it for free.
We're going to come back to that.
You know?
We're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that because I think it's important. So 2022 happens, okay, and you know,
Cards
and
shit
just
the
so
bed.
you know, like everything shits the bed, you know, and we actually ended up stopping doing the Hard Money podcast, not for any bad reason, and we're bringing, you know, Matt's going to come back and Gabe at times, we just got like overwhelmed with shit. You know, Matt had a bunch of startup businesses. I had startup businesses. We were dealing with our newsletter business, just keeping that, you know, with the volatility and all that. But but I guess for your card,
the tale of two stories. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to say something, but for your card strategy, it sounds like you were mostly, you were buying assets, you were upgrading them, you were keeping the majority of them for the long term, but then sort of on the side, opportunistically flipping them to help generate, you know, or just because you had the opportunity, not to generate income, but to kind of subsidize everything else.
Exactly.
So you weren't necessarily involved in an income generation strategy. It happened to generate some income, but you kind of just plowed it all back in.
Yeah.
So that brings us to January 2022. We're 2 years later now. What's happened to the card market since? And actually, I'm going to take a step back. I look at it from the outside. I wasn't trading cards at the time because I just had too much stuff going on. But I just saw all this crazy shit going off, you know, and especially we're not even talking about NFTs, and you know we can touch on that subject a little bit later on. But it felt to me that like the card market, you know, it's like what happens a lot with collectibles. The best of the best of the best of the best kind of continued to stay there. They stopped going up as much, but they were still fairly fungible. And if you wanted to move a PSA 10 Fleer, Jordan card, you probably could move it, and you probably could move it near what it went out at the top, or, plus or minus 10, 15%. Then below that, you had to probably take a 20 to 30% haircut, on anything that's kind of goes from A plus to A. A minus, you might even take a 50% haircut, and B plus, you just couldn't even fucking sell it. Like the liquidity just dropped out of the market. So it wasn't even so much that price moved. I mean, price did move for stuff below, but that the volumes went down 90%, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that? And I've paid no attention. I just know a lot about markets. What happened from 22 to today?
That's very accurate. I will say what I did is a lot like in real estate, where you make money on the buy. Basically my basis in these cards, it guarantees a return. I got them for so little, it doesn't matter. So I was kind of safe there. And honestly, also my timeline was different than this market's timeline, so it didn't matter. But you pretty much nailed it. I would say your blue chip, A plus, whatever, B plus and beyond type stuff, that might, like the modern stuff, tanked a lot. So your premium stuff, okay, maybe 10, 20%, something like that. The Jordan PSA 10, believe it or not, got wiped pretty good. I mean, I would say that got wiped 2/3.
Okay, wow.
Because it's
that one was that one also, like, that's the problem too. It's that one is like that piece of art that goes from 10 million to 90 million because some Saudi fucking dude decided he wanted to pay 90 million for it, but there was only one buyer at 90 million. So that one I could see a little bit, but yeah.
And there's one guy that controls most of the market. He has 23 of the PSA 10s, Rick Probstein. He was on our podcast.
Got it.
So, that's got weird market behavior there. But yes, you're right. I would say a lot of the modern cars just lost 9% of their value. Vintage, I don't know, 20% haircut. Signed vintage, almost nothing. If actually, in fact, signed vintage might have increased during this period, because I think people are like, "Oh my God, run to safety, right?" And it's like, that's safe. They're not printing any more of those. So you're pretty accurate there.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to dive into this a little bit. So signed vintage, because I man, I don't even remember what we spoke about 2 years ago. First off, because I got fucking PTSD from a whole bunch of shit. But is signed vintage? Is it literally just, and I say literally just, I know it's more complicated than this. You basically identify a rare card. You probably slabbed, because you want to find something that's got a decent grade. You crack the slab, you get the guy to sign it, you get it regraded and hope that the grade holds. And now you've just got a much more valuable asset. Is that really
That's half. The other half is the more daring half, where I'm finding old guys with old stuff in old attics. It ain't slabbed. Could have been done by a secretary. Could have been done by the player. Could have been done by a plagiarizer in the 70s. And I'm taking gambles on those. And some of them are not paying off. And I have to convince PSA to slab them,
When you say old guys, you're saying old players?
Old dudes, old collectors. The old vintage autograph collectors that have shoe boxes of these cards, and they don't realize, they did TTM, like through the mail type stuff.
Got it. So you're actually finding they're old cards. You're finding old. You're focused on autographs.
Yeah.
So you're focused on people that have autographed.
I mean, if the players are dead, half of them are dead. You have no choice but to find an already autographed card.
Yeah. Well, and so then, are you doing that both with cards and whatchamacallit?
Like memorabilia?
Like memorabilia.
I'm doing it mostly with, I don't really care so much about the memorabilia part of it. Others do, like bats and jerseys and stuff. Just cards for me, probably because I have OCD and I'm doing these sets. But it's pretty much just like the on card. And the other interesting thing is, nobody ever wanted to sign on card back then because they thought it devalued the rookie card. So there's less supply, right? It's crazy.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like, and I'm not trying to create competition for you,
go ahead.
Like it sounds like there's still an opportunity that you focus on vintage, you focus on rarity, and then you focus on autographs.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go down that path and you know that you can create some value there. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, one more very quick arbitrage that's probably open for another year and will close for the audience if they're interested. PSA has these old labels. They're called blue flip labels. You can't miss them. Go on eBay. It'll look like this old blue label on top. They never graded the card when it was signed in here. It just says authentic. Card's authentic. It's real. Signature's authentic. That card could be like a 7. So you start eyeballing those and you say, all right, that card's like a 7 card, 10 auto. Resubmit it to PSA. I just did that with a Bill Russell. It was worth $2,000 as is in a blue label. And I got a 3 on the card. This is a 61 card.
Yeah,
it's
a
310 auto. It's worth $5,000. So I made $3,000 out of thin air, just blinking, basically.
Got it. And so that is, I think I remember this. PSA used to do, you could submit a card, not get the card graded, but get the autograph graded, right?
Mm-hmm. You still can, but most people have gamed it in the new labels. The old stuff's still out there, though. Go to the old shows. Find your old friends. You can make some money.
Got it. And then let me just ask you again. These are things like that I just don't know. I mean, do you screw around with BGC? Do you do anything other than PSA, or is it just PSA?
Yeah, Beckett slabs are fine. They've kind of shit the bed a little bit in terms of brand equity and value over the last year. PSA is just skyrocketing, and Beckett's sort of just muddling, which is a shame because they kind of started this whole thing with the Beckett price guides and stuff. So,
they started with the price guides, but they didn't start it with the grading. I mean, my buddies created PSA.
Correct.
So, yeah. Oh, so is there now, because for a while there, it seemed like there was a price parity between BGC and PSA. Like there wasn't a lot of difference, but you're saying now there's more of a premium to PSA.
PSA owns 90% of the market right now.
Got it.
I mean, it's a classic monopoly, classic monopoly. And Beckett's just kind of chugging at like 15%.
Okay. And there have been a couple other grading outfits that had some legitimacy.
Yeah, SGC, and guess who just bought them? PSA. More of a monopoly. It's an amazing industry for it's ripe for disruption if anybody wants to come in and have fun with it.
Well, I'll tell you, I was thinking about this episode. So we were talking about this the other day. I'm friends with a guy named Van Simmons and David Hall. And Van and David, they're both in their 70s. They are actually the ones who created Collectors Universe, created PSA. They started in coins with, I guess it's PCGS. And I want to get Van on, and we'll do it together because you've got so much more to. We'll do a collab between our two podcasts here. And Van just has stories. I think I was telling you, he's like, what's the Mantle rookie card? Is that 56?
52, man. That thing's a beast.
52.
Yeah.
No, he's like, yeah, I bought 10 of those 52s. I paid $800 each for them. I was like, God, I'm getting ripped off. And then, they went to like $3,000 and I sold them all just because I took the money. And it's like, and I'm like, what do you think those graded at? And he goes, I don't know, 6s to 8s, I'm just like, what
$10 million card.
You're gonna,
it's all good.
No, it's crazy. But actually the thing I love about Van is he'll tell that story. And he's very nonchalant about it. He's just like, I mean, first off, it happened in like 1983 or something. So he's not like, he's not like, because I'd be like, oh my God, I had like $700 million worth of cards I sold for $21,000. He's like, yeah, it just happens. But that would be, he'd be a good guy to get on.
That would be awesome.
Got it.
That would be awesome.
So today you're focused primarily on, again, the autograph market, identifying rare cards, figuring out how to get rare cards autographed, acquire autographs, a lot of these celebrities. How much time do you think you spend on it today?
Oh, the terms of collecting, probably just a few hours a week. The podcast is a bit different where, I think...
And I want to talk about that next.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I spend more time on that because that's really fun. But in terms of actually collecting the cards, it's a few hours a week. I'm just kind of focusing on the sets and then just some random nostalgic stuff like the Skybox prototype cards from the 90s that I grew up with, getting those signed because they're super rare and people don't realize how rare they are. So not a ton of time, not as much as before.
Okay. 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 So do you? Well, let's talk about the podcast. So tell me about the podcast, when you launched it, what you guys are doing, and all that.
Yeah, we were just at the 13th barbecue of last summer. My brother-in-law and I were like, you know what? We geek out on this stuff all the time. Like, let's just hit record. So we started recording. It's called Sports Card Madness, and it's been awesome. So we'll talk about, it's kind of for noobs. If you don't know anything, you don't know what grading is, cards are, whatever. We have this like Madness University every Tuesday. We give you like a bite-size, chew on it type topics. You can get educated on how to get into this. But then on Fridays, we do like the main episode. And that could be everything from, we had Walt Frazier on to Nat Turner's the CEO of PSA. We'll talk about industry issues, news, stuff like that. We got a great YouTube channel where we actually post some of our collections. I did like a 20-minute how-to on how I built my $300,000 set. It's on there. If you watch that, you can probably do like half of it for free. It's literally a tutorial. So we got stuff like that, and we're just kind of having a blast. So yeah, it hasn't even been a year yet, but it's doing great.
Very cool, very cool. And I'm guessing that's on Apple, Spotify,
Yep.
you name it. It's
Apple,
out there.
Spotify, YouTube, Sports Card Madness.
Got it. Okay, so a couple of last questions. Did you ever dabble in NFTs? Did you ever so full disclosure, we actually put together a group of us, an NFT acquisition. I won't call it a fund. It was more like a collective. We still have it out there, and we're about to give an update. We focused on those original Topps NFTs, which I got to tell you, I still think they're going to have value, because Topps is still the best brand out there, in my opinion. I think it's going to have more value now that it's a part of Fanatics, because they're going to do like what Collectors Universe has been doing with PSA, going out and dominating the market. And when all is said and done, when everyone looks back in 30 years, they're going to say, well, the first real legitimate card NFTs were that series of Topps. There's no doubt about it. Like, this is the original. And it's funny because we've seen this happen in physical cards over and over and over, where there was kind of like, oh, that was a flop. No one really cared. And then 30 years later or 20 years later, people go, well, that was a flop, but no one paid attention. And now they're really hard to find. And that was the first one. It kind of sucked. You still got them. Okay. So we're going to go out, just so you know, we're going to go out to all the members of the collaborative, and we're going to offer them an opportunity. We've got some cash to distribute, or you can stay in there. I'm very bullish on it. I think that, it's just, there's going to be this hockey stick moment where something's going to happen, and people all of us are going to wake up and go, holy shit, these were the first real baseball collectible NFTs, just the same way that Top Shot was there, but in baseball. But yeah, what have you done on NFTs? Do you dabble in NFTs? Tell us a little bit about that.
That was an interesting time to be alive, my friend. One of the coolest years of human behavior that will ever be studied for centuries. Just, bubble behavior, dead cat bounces, just like everything you can imagine. And I think, so I got into the Topps thing because I actually liked baseball, and I liked Topps, and I have like a Mookie Betts one that's like the cube that spins around. I thought it looked cool.
Yeah,
I wasn't necessarily doing it for a profit or a flip on those cards. I know we messed around with the Snecks. I mean, that was just awesomeness and a lot of fun with lots of fraud. And that's how you spot a bubble, is all the fraud. It's crazy.
Well, I don't remember. Do you remember that Hard Money? We actually did the crypto Ponzi's.
Yes, I do remember.
Which I love, which by the way, so apparently, and we'll get Tim Thrush on here at some point. At some point, OpenSea took all of our crypto Ponzi's away, and we don't know why, and they've never explained. They just disappeared. And we're still trying to figure it out. But it was the most appropriately named NFT project ever. And that was the whole fucking point.
Exactly.
It was the crypto Ponzi's. We were making a point that but those that Mookie Betts card was those three, the cubes they were called.
It spins.
And we still have one of the largest collections of cubes out there. I think we have the third largest collection. We have a full set of cubes for every team. I think we've got 9 of them or something like that. I'm sitting on that shit.
I remember you got the Trout Otanis, and you controlled the market on those. It was really fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
So what have you done? Are you basically just sitting on some of the stuff that you bought from back then and all that?
Yeah, I don't think I won't say never. I don't see myself seriously getting into NFTs in the next
Yeah.
few years, I'm going to let other slightly more crazy, slightly more smart people figure it out. And then I'll be a laggard on that one. But I'm keeping these, just because they're cool. And I did it with my son. I even have packs I haven't opened still on here. And what the hell? I mean, it's they're just sitting there. So why not just sit there a little longer? I even have the Garbage Pail Kids with the wax redemptions on the back. I bought those up on eBay. I have like 100 of them just for nostalgia. And I'm going to just send them all to PSA and see how many 10s I can get. Like an unscratched wax redemption. Who knows? Maybe wax could rip someday, right? And then I've got all this it's crazy.
I think if you've got the patience, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So we've got I'll tell you this, a random story. I'm actually going to take, how old is you have a son and a daughter?
Yeah. My son's 9, my daughter's 13.
Okay, your son's 9. Okay, so my son's 10. He's recently got crazy into Star Wars stuff. And he also recently got into, on Roblox, some point, and I don't know when, they launched a stock trading game on Roblox. And he watches my podcast. Like he gets on, he's like, Daddy, they're fascinated that I have a YouTube channel. First off, he's soon to be 11. I've got a 7 and a 3. And there's some trading game on Roblox, and I'm actually going to get in there with him because I don't know if you and I spoke about this. Like one of the topics
did not know about that game.
I literally just learned about it a week or two ago with HX. Like, look, I do this because I love talking about markets. I love sharing things with people. This can be a very lucrative business. And I really love the idea of taking complex topics, access to great information, and making it available to regular, real people. Another topic that fascinates me, though, is the lack of financial education we give our youth. That, and I might have told you this analogy, that sex education 30 years ago, you couldn't talk about anything sex in school, and then people grew up and they didn't know what the hell they were doing. Now you can talk about anything sex you want. Talk about blowjobs and to 9-year-olds, and there's books about it. But if you talk about accounting, or you talk about finance, or you talk about, no, you can't ruin their childhood by actually teaching them valuable skills about how to manage their money. So we're going to lean into this. I've been talking to him about maybe doing a series of podcasts. So I'm actually going to start, and we're going to go. I've got a hole down in the basement. I have a whole thing of 30 boxes of Star Wars toys that I bought when when KB Toy went out of business, and they were just selling them for 99 cents. I don't think the 30 boxes is worth $3,000, to be honest, because those things just didn't have any value. But what I'm going to do is we're going to go and we're going to catalog them, and then we're going to go sell them, to educate, I want him to see the process. Have you done this with your son? Or do you kind of educate him and show him the trading and the dynamics?
Yeah, first off, keep me in mind if you got some cool stuff there, because I might be down. I'm a Star Wars guy too. So,
no, but can we stick on that for a second? The thing with the Star Wars stuff is that, so I got a lot of the 12 inches and things like that. But, when they did the Phantom Menace grouping, they just put out, there have been no Star Wars toys for 15 years. Anything they initially put out sold like crazy, and then they slammed the market. It's the equivalent of baseball cards in the 90s. They just put out so much stuff, and fucking Jar Jar Binks, don't get me started. Anyways, but so we bought it. It's 99 cents. I don't know. I'm going to price it out, and we'll see. I'll give you a first look before we put it. Sure. We live in New Milford, Connecticut, which has the largest flea market, summer flea market in the country, in all of New England. But I'll give you a first look on all this stuff. Nice. But what are you doing with your son?
Yeah, I help him understand collectibles, and this will be worth something someday. I think he appreciates that and thinks of it as a cool thing. He gets a lot of his content and education from YouTube, and I try to make sure he at least watches something productive, Mr. Beast's hacks for getting people's attention, stuff like that, where I want him immersed in this digital world that is probably all that's going to matter, when he's 20 in his 20s.
Yeah.
So helping him, edit videos and do things like that and learn some of those skills at the age of 9, he'll be ahead of everybody in high school. But in terms of, cards is good. Like you go to a card show, you learn to talk to human beings, right? You learn how to use your voice
that's interesting.
and eye contact. You learn how to negotiate. You learn setbacks. You learn hurdles. You learn, things like that. So there's a lot of life lessons, and collecting is a dedication type thing. We got one random project, by the way. We're trying to get every U.S. senator to sign a card, and we're like 25% through. Just a little George Washington card. And he's writing to him, and he's learning about this.
Is Elizabeth Warren going to sign Pocahontas on it for you?
She hasn't signed. My other... Oh, yeah. I don't know how politically you want to get on the show, but oh man, yeah, I don't. So Ed Marquis signed it, but she hasn't, and I'm in her home state, man. You got to sign that.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, but it's funny what you said because my son, he's been doing coding since he was 5. And I actually just got him signed up. I'm working on getting him a video editing class, because I was like, look, things that coding to me is like just like speaking Spanish in this country.
Yeah.
Like you're going to use it. I don't care what you're going to do. It's going to come up. And then the other thing is all I know is video editing. It's about, you may never use it your entire life, but that one time it's going to come up. It might be the damn family video or something like that. But so let's go back to this one last thing, so it sounds like, well, I got 2 things actually. It sounds like you've taken something that you really love, you really enjoy, you find intellectually invigorating, you figure out a system to do it, and and you're doing it profitably, and you're certainly not wasting your money. You're probably creating some value. Is that something you would recommend to people if they're willing to do the work and have the interest?
Definitely, especially if they have no diversification beyond traditional markets, maybe a little private equity or something like that, and they're just looking for a different place to put 2% of their money that's going to just, like you say, it's uncorrelated, right? You're smarter than me with this stuff, but it's going to move differently. And if you're enjoying it and you can probably put a pretty solid bet on it, kind of a no-brainer,
Well, I don't, the thing is, uncorrelated. I struggle with it, right? All risk assets are correlated.
Sure.
Like when the stock market's doing great, everything's going to do great. I think that what you've done is you've picked a layer of the asset class, a cohort of the asset class that will be relatively uncorrelated, and I think there's something to be said for scarcity and rarity. So
over a timeline too.
Yeah. So over on this wall over here, I'm going to tell you something about the tattoo world. So in the tattoo world for hundreds of years, so real modern tattooing started about 150 years ago, a little bit in England, a lot in the United States, all these port towns, Virginia, the Carolinas, eventually Long Beach. And the way people got tattooed was you didn't do a custom tattoo where you say, oh, I want this picture, that picture. You were typically drunk and you'd walk into the shop and there'd be something on the wall and you'd be like, I want one of those, the heart that says mom. And it was called Tattoo Flash. And it was original art that was done by the tattooers. They would do it in ink and then they would watercolor it. And there's a handful, 50, 100 tattooers that are the Babe Ruths of tattooing. Sailor Jerry is one that you may have heard of. He had 225 pieces of flash in his Hawaii shop. I've got 6 of them hanging up on this wall.
Wow.
There's one Sailor Jerry. There's 225 pieces of that art. 6 of them are here. There are 100 million people with tattoos. This collection here, which I paid, I don't know, 40 grand for, I think could be worth 40 million at some point. But my point is I think if you take things, there are 2 points here. Find things that you enjoy, that you can get into, that you get into the details, but then focus on scarcity and rarity because the people that are losing their shirts are the ones buying, and I like Juan Soto right now because he's playing for my Yankees, but the Juan Soto foil extra premium blah blah blah, sure there's scarcity because maybe there's 10 of them, but it's not scarcity like buying like this thing. No. This guy died in like 1972. It's like, and
those
there are 225
cards, man,
of those.
There are thousands of one-of-ones. There's more one-of-ones than like signed Bill Russell cards every year. It's crap. It's not really
right. No. So I think it's a great if you're willing to do that. No, I think it's a great way to educate kids and all that. So two last things. What do you do on the investing side? It sounds like you have a pretty steady, secure portfolio, or what's the strategy there?
I finally gave up like 5 years ago and just had somebody else manage my money. Somebody who I trust with a good track record, that we're like family. We talk about our families. Like I trust him with my life, like that type of relationship. And he's great. He'll tell me, hey, I'm going to make money off of this or whatever. And, we're just an open book. I know what the fees I'm going to pay. And it's just your traditional, I've worked hard. I've kind of already won the game in terms of my portfolio. So I don't want to do stupid things with it. So there's a little bit less risk for me. So we ratchet it back a little bit. But yeah, I'm happy with how he's managing it. It's doing great. I won't have as high, you know how it is, right? The highs are muted, the lows are muted.
Yeah.
I run in a tighter band, but it's great. And then I take some of my money and, I gamble with it, right? Like most people should.
Well, HX Research, man, we got some great ideas. You should buy. I think I sent that to you. That nuke idea, like that one. That one to me is not gambling, and I think you can make 2 to 3.
I sent that to my brother-in-law, and he's like, "Who the hell is this guy? This newsletter is amazing. This stock has already made 45% since the newsletter came out. Please send me these as much as you can."
Yeah. No, I'm telling you, it's up 45%, and it's going up a lot more. It's like that's one where I even hesitated a little bit, but after I did more of the work. Okay, last part. Where can people? So I'm fascinated by this. I think people should definitely check out your podcast. I want to do some more collaborations. Have you thought about doing? And it's not that much work, and it's a very interesting business. It's an addendum to the podcast business. Have you thought about doing a newsletter of some sort where you kind of encapsulate some
that could be part of the evolution at some point. Right now, we're just trying to make good episodes and good, helpful content for collectors and noobs, and then that will probably evolve into several things.
Okay. Well, we should talk. We can help you set up a newsletter very easily. I'm being serious here. But what's the give us again where to follow you on social and where to find the podcast. Give us all the information one more time.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram as Boston Card Hunter. Pretty easy to find. I'm an open book there. Ask me anything. And the podcast is Sports Card Madness. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. YouTube, there's a lot more episodes, like interesting videos and things like that. And then on Spotify and Apple, there's episodes every Tuesday and Friday.
Okay, great. Well, look, I want to say another message for my listeners here. We all invest to grow our wealth and make money. But the frank fact is, I think a huge aspect of our desire to be active investors is also education, entertainment, engagement. If you look at all the longevity statistics, the people who live till they're 90, it's because they were engaged, and I always say that the stock market, and I mean this as a positive, is the greatest intellectual competition that's ever been created in the history of mankind. But I think that can be said true of a lot of these asset markets. And so, I think there's a huge value to figuring out uncorrelated assets, ones where you have an interest, ones where you can drive. I mean, what's better than doing something you love, being highly engaged, educating yourself, and making fucking money, and the one thing I'll add last here with Collectibles is you can get your kids into it. So, I think that's a really, really cool thing. And so I love having you on here, Nick. Let's do some more stuff together. Please, everyone follow Nick, subscribe to his channels, all that stuff. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this different episode of the HX podcast. We'll be doing more of these in the future, and wish everyone a great week.
Thanks, Enrique.
Thank you.